Washington is watching the unthinkable unfold. More than 160 House Democrats have signed their names to articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. This isn't political theater. This is the moment when federal agents killed 2 American citizens on American soil during immigration enforcement, and Congress decided that accountability still matters. What began as Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis has erupted into the most serious cabinet crisis in modern American history. And the evidence is so overwhelming that even some Republicans are starting to break ranks. Let me take you inside what's really happening, because the corporate media isn't telling you the full story. They're giving you sound bites and partisan spin. But at Warfield Chronicles, we dig deeper. We follow the evidence. We connect the dots. And what we've uncovered about this crisis will shock you. It starts on January 6th, 2026. The Department of Homeland Security announced what it called the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out in American history. 2,000 federal agents deployed to the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area. Not 200, 2,000. For context, the entire Minneapolis Police Department has just 600 officers. Think about that ratio. More than 3 federal immigration agents for every local cop. This wasn't law enforcement, this was an occupation force. Local officials immediately sounded alarms. St. Paul City Council member Molly Coleman said the first day of the operation was unlike any other day we've experienced. Residents in majority immigrant neighborhoods reported feeling terrorized. One eyewitness later told reporters that people in our neighborhood have been terrorized by ICE for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of helicopter flyovers, armored vehicles, tactical teams raiding apartment buildings at dawn, agents in full combat gear patrolling residential streets. And then came January 7th. Renee Nicole Macklin Good, a 37-year-old American woman, was sitting in her car on a Minneapolis street. Her vehicle was stopped sideways, partially blocking traffic. According to multiple witness accounts and video evidence that would later emerge, an ICE agent named Jonathan Ross walked around her vehicle. Then he walked back around it again. Other agents approached. One reached through her open window and ordered her to exit the car. Renee briefly reversed her vehicle, then began moving forward and to the right, into the direction of traffic. At this point, Jonathan Ross was standing at the front left of her vehicle. He fired 3 shots. Renee Good died from those gunshots as her vehicle passed him, turning away from him. She never hit the agent. Video evidence confirmed this. She was driving away from the confrontation, not toward it. Within hours, federal officials and President Trump himself defended the shooting. They claimed Ross acted in self-defense. They said Renee Good ran him over with her vehicle. They even claimed the agent was recovering in a hospital from his injuries. Every single one of these claims was false. Video evidence directly contradicted each assertion. Renee Good never struck the agent with her vehicle. The agent was never hospitalized. And the shooting occurred as she was driving away, not toward any federal personnel. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz held a press conference that same afternoon. His words were measured but devastating. He called Renee's death the consequences of governance designed to generate fear, headlines, and conflict. He added, "We do not need any further help from the federal government." Then Walz did something extraordinary. He ordered Minnesota's National Guard to adopt a state of preparedness. A Democratic governor was positioning state military forces as a potential check against federal law enforcement. That's how serious this had become. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey was even more direct. After reviewing video footage of the shooting himself, he held a press conference and said, quote, "Having seen the video myself, I want to tell everybody directly that is bullshit." Then he looked directly into the cameras and said, "To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis." A sitting mayor of a major American city publicly telling federal law enforcement to leave. That doesn't happen unless the situation has become absolutely untenable. Protests erupted immediately. Thousands took to the streets. The Minneapolis Police Department activated mutual aid from surrounding jurisdictions, preparing for potential civil unrest. Governor Walz proclaimed January 9th as Renee Good Day, honoring her memory and implicitly condemning the federal action that killed her. But Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem didn't back down. She didn't order a review. She didn't call for transparency. Instead, federal presence in Minneapolis intensified. The 2,000 agents stayed. Operations continued, and tensions escalated daily. For 17 days, Minneapolis existed in a state of siege. Federal agents conducted daily raids. Protesters gathered at detention sites. Local officials publicly battled with DHS over jurisdiction and authority. Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin accused the FBI of a cover-up when Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension had their access to the Renee investigation revoked. Federal authorities were actively blocking state investigators from examining evidence in the death of an American citizen killed by federal agents on state soil. Then came January 24th, and everything exploded. Alex Jeffrey Pretti was a 37-year-old intensive care nurse who worked at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs Hospital. For 17 days, he had participated in protests against federal immigration operations. He wasn't an agitator, he wasn't violent, he was an ICU nurse who spent his career saving lives, and he was deeply disturbed by what was happening in his city. His father later told reporters that Alex cared about people deeply, and he was very upset with what was happening in Minneapolis and throughout the United States with ICE. On the morning of January 24th, Alex was documenting federal agents during an immigration enforcement operation in downtown Minneapolis. Multiple verified videos show him holding his phone, recording the scene. He was wearing casual clothes. He was unarmed in the sense that he had no weapon in his hands. He did have a 9mm semi-automatic handgun in a holster on his waist, which he was legally permitted to carry. Alex Pretti had no criminal record. His only interaction with law enforcement had been traffic tickets. The timeline of what happened next has been reconstructed from multiple verified video angles and forensic audio analysis. At 8:58 a.m. and 11 seconds, Alex was holding his phone, recording a federal officer. At 8:58 a.m. and 22 seconds, a second federal officer carrying pepper spray approached him. At 8:58 a.m. and 29 seconds, one officer pushed Alex toward the sidewalk. For the next minute, Alex continued recording as agents detained someone nearby. At 9 a.m. and 41 seconds, a federal officer confronted two women who were blowing whistles. The officer pushed both women. One of them ran toward Alex. According to the preliminary CBP assessment that was later leaked to congressional sources and reviewed by NPR, the officer then attempted to move the woman and Pretti out of the roadway. The woman and Pretti did not move. The officer then pepper sprayed both of them. What happened in the next 60 seconds is captured on at least 7 different video angles from bystanders. Alex was tackled by multiple federal agents. Video shows at least 6 agents swarming him, wrestling him to the ground face down. While he was pinned on the pavement, one agent can be seen removing Alex's holstered handgun. Another agent can be seen repeatedly punching Alex while he's restrained on the ground. Then, while Alex Pretti was face down, surrounded by 6 federal agents, already disarmed, an agent drew his own service weapon and fired. In total, 10 shots were fired in less than 5 seconds, according to forensic audio analysis. 6 of those shots were fired at Alex's motionless body after he was already down. A doctor who witnessed the shooting later provided a statement that haunts everyone who reads it. Quote, "I saw that the victim was lying on his side and was surrounded by several ICE agents. I was confused as to why the victim was on his side, because that is not standard practice when a victim has been shot. Checking for a pulse and administering CPR is standard practice. Instead of doing either of those things, the ICE agents appeared to be counting his bullet wounds." End quote. Federal agents didn't render aid. They counted bullet wounds. An ICU nurse who spent his career saving lives bled out on a Minneapolis street while armed federal agents stood over him, counting how many times they'd shot him. The federal response was immediate and catastrophic. Within hours, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem held a press conference. She didn't wait for investigation. She didn't review evidence. She declared that Alex Pretti arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. She called his actions domestic terrorism. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller went even further, calling Alex a would-be assassin in a public statement. Let that sink in. A cabinet secretary and a senior White House official publicly branded an American citizen, an ICU nurse at a veterans hospital, a domestic terrorist and would-be assassin within hours of his death, before any investigation, based solely on preliminary reports from the agents who killed him. Alex Pretti's parents released a statement saying they were sickened by Trump administration officials suggesting their son was a domestic terrorist. His colleagues at the VA hospital were devastated. Dr. Dimitri Draconia, who worked with Alex, told reporters, There is no reason for a guy like that to be dead, let alone to be killed by the agents of a government that employed him. He described Alex as sweet, kind, someone who loved the outdoors and mountain biking, an incredibly competent person who was good at his job. Neighbors were stunned. Gene Weiner, who lived next door to Alex and would chat with him when he walked his dog, told Minnesota Public Radio, "He was a calm person. He's a nurse. I'm mad. I'm angry. This was a good person. This is not a violent person." But here's where the story takes a turn that changes everything. Because within 72 hours of those inflammatory statements from Noem and Miller, the evidence started contradicting the official narrative in ways that couldn't be ignored. The preliminary CBP assessment, the internal government review based on body-worn camera footage and documentation from the agency itself, makes no mention of Pretti attacking officers or threatening them with a weapon. None. The assessment describes him being pepper-sprayed, resisting arrest, and a struggle ensuing. But nowhere does it support Noem's claim of domestic terrorism or Miller's assassin narrative. Multiple bystander videos verified by Reuters, the BBC, the Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press show Alex never reached for his gun. An agent removed it from his holster while Alex was pinned face down. The videos show an agent drawing his own weapon while another agent repeatedly punches Alex. 10 shots in less than 5 seconds. 6 shots fired at a motionless body. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara confirmed Alex Pretti was a lawful gun owner with a Minnesota state permit. He had no criminal record. And CNN obtained medical records showing that approximately 1 week before his death, Alex had suffered a broken rib when 5 federal officers tackled him during a previous protest incident where he was trying to protect a family being chased by ICE. DHS claimed they had no record of that incident, despite the medical documentation and witness accounts. The shooting sparked immediate national outcry. The NBA postponed a Minnesota Timberwolves game scheduled for that evening due to safety concerns. Thousands attended candlelight vigils across the Twin Cities. A GoFundMe for Alex's family raised $1 million in less than 24 hours. Bruce Springsteen released a protest song called Streets of Minneapolis, memorializing Renee Good and Alex Pretti. Even Chris Medell, a Republican lawyer who had previously represented the ICE agent who shot Renee Good, withdrew from the 2026 Minnesota gubernatorial race, saying he could not support the Republican Party for what he called retribution. And then Congress moved. On January 14th, Representative Robin Kelly from Illinois introduced articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem. The charges included obstruction of congressional oversight of ICE facilities, violations of public trust through warrantless arrest without due process, and self-dealing for personal benefit. By January 15th, the resolution had more than 70 signatures. By January 27th, that number had grown to 162 House Democrats. 162. That's 3/4 of the entire Democratic caucus. Not just the progressive wing, not just the squad. Mainstream Democrats, moderates, committee chairs, senior members who had served for decades and never voted for impeachment, all signing their names to articles demanding Kristi Noem be removed from office. On January 27th, House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries held an emergency press conference flanked by Democratic Whip Katherine Clark and Caucus Chairman Pete Aguilar. Jeffries looked directly into the cameras and said, "We will commence impeachment proceedings against Kristi Noem in the absence of her being fired by Donald Trump." The deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretti represent a catastrophic failure of leadership, accountability, and basic human decency. Representative Jamie Raskin, the ranking Democrat on Judiciary, went even further. He directly called on Republican Chairman Jim Jordan to begin formal impeachment proceedings immediately. Now, Raskin knows Jordan won't do it. Jim Jordan is one of Trump's most loyal defenders in Congress, but Raskin is doing something brilliant here. He's creating a public record. He's forcing Jordan to either hold hearings on the deaths of 2 American citizens or publicly refuse to investigate. Either choice destroys Jordan politically with swing district voters. The articles of impeachment read like a criminal indictment. Gross negligence resulting in civilian deaths. Failure to properly train and supervise federal agents. Providing false statements to Congress about the incidents. Obstructing congressional oversight by refusing to turn over body camera footage and operational protocols. Each charge is supported by specific evidence, medical examiner findings, verified video footage, witness testimony under oath, internal DHS communications obtained through whistleblowers. And the evidence keeps mounting. We now know from leaked internal emails that senior DHS officials warned about the Minneapolis deployment before it happened. Career officials predicted that aggressive tactics would result in civilian casualties. Kristi Noem allegedly dismissed these warnings and ordered agents to proceed anyway. If those emails are authenticated, if those whistleblowers testify under oath, Noem doesn't just face impeachment. She potentially faces criminal liability for reckless endangerment and obstruction of justice. Some Republicans are starting to crack. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, usually a reliable party vote, publicly stated she has serious concerns about the federal response in Minneapolis. Republican Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska said the shootings raise disturbing questions that deserve answers. Even Senators Ted Cruz and John Curtis criticized Noem's immediate rush to label Alex Pretti a domestic terrorist before any investigation. But here's what makes this moment truly historic. Federal Judge Patrick Schultz issued a scathing ruling on January 27th, temporarily barring ICE from arresting refugees in Minnesota who haven't received green cards and haven't been charged with removable offenses. But it was Judge Schultz's language that stunned legal observers. He wrote, "This list should give pause to anyone, no matter his or her political beliefs, who cares about the rule of law." ICE has likely violated more court orders in January 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. A federal judge just said ICE violated more court orders in 1 month than entire agencies do in their lifetimes. He issued a warning stating that future noncompliance may result in orders requiring the personal appearance of ICE Director Patrick Lyons or other government officials. A federal judge is threatening to haul DHS leadership into court for contempt. Meanwhile, the human cost keeps mounting. Representative Ilhan Omar held a town hall in Minneapolis where she called for ICE to be abolished and demanded Noem resign or be impeached. During that event, a man confronted her, sprayed her with a substance later identified as apple cider vinegar, and appeared to yell, "You must resign." Security tackled him. The FBI is now investigating the assault on a member of Congress. Yet Trump's top law enforcement officials have remained largely silent about an attack against a sitting congresswoman, even though assaulting a member of Congress is a federal crime. Governor Walz met with Border Czar Tom Homan this week. After that meeting, Walz said he's seen no evidence of ICE withdrawing from Minneapolis. He told reporters once again to Renee and Alex's family, "Minnesota has a responsibility to get you justice, and Minnesota has a responsibility to show the rest of the nation just how wrong this is." Trump has remained mostly silent. He dispatched Homan to Minnesota for damage control, but the president himself hasn't addressed the shootings in any substantive way. That silence is deafening. Trump knows the videos are damning. He knows the evidence contradicts his administration's narrative. He knows that defending Noem means defending the indefensible. But firing Noem creates its own catastrophe. It admits his administration killed 2 American citizens and tried to cover it up with false statements. It energizes Democrats. It demoralizes his base. It validates every criticism about authoritarian overreach and federal law enforcement abuse. If he keeps Noem, Democrats proceed with impeachment hearings that will dominate coverage for months. Every day will feature testimony from witnesses, medical examiners, family members, video evidence. Every Republican will be forced to vote on whether killing American citizens during immigration operations is acceptable government conduct. This isn't just about one cabinet secretary. This is about whether federal agents can kill American citizens on American soil and face zero accountability. This is about whether cabinet officials can refuse congressional oversight when their agencies kill civilians. This is about whether the Department of Homeland Security operates under constitutional constraints or functions as a domestic paramilitary force accountable to no one. If Kristi Noem survives this without impeachment, without firing, without any accountability whatsoever, it establishes a precedent that federal agents have effective immunity to kill civilians as long as they claim self-defense, regardless of contradictory evidence. Future administrations will understand they can deploy federal forces domestically, escalate confrontations, and face no consequences when civilians die. That's not a constitutional republic. That's an authoritarian state where the executive branch's armed forces operate above the law. Constitutional scholars are calling this the most serious abuse of federal law enforcement power since Waco in 1993. But there's a critical difference. Waco involved a heavily armed religious cult in a 51-day standoff. Minneapolis involved a mother sitting in a car and an ICU nurse with a phone. The level of force used against American civilians in routine immigration operations is unprecedented in modern American history. And the cover-up pattern is eerily familiar. Federal agents use deadly force. American civilians die. The government immediately claims self-defense. Video evidence contradicts the official story. Congress demands accountability. The executive branch stonewalls. State investigators are blocked from examining evidence. Whistleblowers risk their careers to reveal internal warnings that were ignored. And Americans are left asking whether anyone in power will face consequences. Make sure you hit that like button for Warfield Chronicles, because we're going to keep following this story until there's accountability. The corporate media will move on to the next crisis, but we won't. We're going to track every hearing, every piece of evidence, every vote. Because this matters. This is the moment that determines whether our constitutional system of checks and balances still functions. Here's where things stand right now, and I want to be crystal clear about the facts. 162 House Democrats have formally signed articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem. That's the largest congressional coalition against a cabinet member in over 50 years. House Democratic leadership has publicly stated they will commence impeachment proceedings if Trump doesn't fire her. Video evidence from multiple verified angles directly contradicts every federal claim about both shootings. Medical examiner findings confirm both victims were shot in ways inconsistent with federal self-defense narratives. Internal government assessments obtained by congressional sources make no mention of the threats officials publicly described. Whistleblowers are providing documentation that Noem personally approved operations despite internal warnings about civilian casualties. A federal judge has accused ICE of violating more court orders in 1 month than some entire agencies do in their existence. And Trump has been essentially silent for days, paralyzed between two politically catastrophic options. The impeachment resolution has been formally introduced. It's not symbolic. It's not going away. With 162 signatures, Democrats have the numbers to move this through committee if they choose. The question is whether Republican leadership allows a vote, and whether any Republicans break ranks to support accountability. Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, who represents a competitive district, has reportedly told colleagues privately that the evidence is deeply troubling. Republican Representative David Valadao from California, who has voted against Trump before, is facing enormous pressure from constituents demanding answers. If even 5 or 10 Republicans support impeachment hearings, it transforms this from a partisan exercise into a legitimate constitutional accountability measure. Trump's political calculation is brutal. His base will absolutely support him standing by Noem and attacking Democrats. But suburban swing voters, the ones who decide elections in competitive districts, are watching videos of a nurse being shot in the back while surrounded by federal agents. Those voters are reading about a mother killed while driving away from a confrontation. Those voters are seeing a cabinet secretary call an ICU nurse a domestic terrorist within hours of his death, then watching evidence completely contradict that claim. Trump won in 2016 and 2024 by holding his base while winning enough swing voters in key states. The Minneapolis shootings and Noem's response are poison with exactly the voters he needs. College-educated suburban women, moderate independents, voters who prioritize law and order, but also basic fairness. These voters don't like seeing federal agents kill American citizens and then lie about it. Internal Republican polling, according to sources who spoke to Politico, shows the Noem situation is a massive vulnerability. 71% of Americans believe Congress should investigate the shootings. 52% of Republicans support investigation. When a majority of your own party wants accountability, you have a political crisis that won't be solved by attacking Democrats. And the evidence keeps getting worse. ABC News conducted minute-by-minute timeline analysis using verified video footage. 3 minutes before the first shot was fired, Alex Pretti was peacefully recording with his phone. Federal agents escalated the confrontation. They pepper-sprayed him. They tackled him. They disarmed him. They pinned him face down. And then they fired 10 shots in 5 seconds, 6 of them into his motionless body. How do you defend that? How does a political party defend federal agents killing a 37-year-old nurse while he's face down, surrounded, and disarmed? How do you defend a cabinet secretary who immediately calls that nurse a domestic terrorist before reviewing any evidence? You can't. There's no talking point that survives contact with the video evidence. There's no partisan spin that overcomes the medical examiner findings. There's no political calculation that makes this acceptable to swing voters who determine elections. That's why Trump is silent. That's why he dispatched Homeland for damage control. That's why some Republicans are quietly breaking ranks. They know this is indefensible. They know the evidence is devastating. And they know that defending the indefensible could cost them their seats in 2026. The institutional implications extend far beyond this one crisis. If Congress impeaches a cabinet secretary with bipartisan support based on documented evidence of their agency killing American citizens, it reestablishes that executive branch officials can be held accountable. It reaffirms that federal law enforcement operates under constitutional constraints. It demonstrates that even in an era of intense polarization, egregious misconduct can still trigger consequences. But if Noem survives without accountability, it sends the opposite message. It tells future administrations that you can deploy federal forces domestically, use deadly force against American civilians, make false public statements about those killings, obstruct congressional oversight, and face zero consequences as long as you maintain partisan support. That's not a hypothetical concern. That's the precedent being set right now. Think about what that means for the next crisis. The next time federal agents kill an American civilian, what stops the administration from making false claims, blocking investigators, refusing congressional oversight, and weathering the political storm? If there are no consequences for Kristi Noem, there's a roadmap for every future administration to follow. So where does this go from here? The impeachment resolution has been referred to the House Judiciary Committee. Chairman Jim Jordan now has to decide whether to hold hearings. If he refuses, Democrats can potentially force a floor vote through procedural mechanisms, though that's difficult with Republicans controlling the chamber. More likely, Democrats will use the impeachment push as leverage for investigations, subpoenas, and public hearings. Even without formal impeachment proceedings, they can haul DHS officials before oversight committees. They can demand body camera footage. They can subpoena internal communications. They can put whistleblowers under oath. They can force Republicans to either participate in oversight or publicly refuse to investigate American deaths. That's the real power of the 162 signatures. It's not just about impeachment. It's about creating unstoppable political pressure for accountability. It's about making this the dominant story until something gives. Either Trump fires Noem to end the crisis, or Democrats force investigations that damage Republicans heading into 2026 elections, or enough Republicans break ranks that formal impeachment becomes viable. Any of those outcomes represents accountability. Any of those outcomes establishes that killing American citizens has consequences. And that's what this is really about. Not partisan advantage, not political calculation, but whether the most basic principle of governance, that government officials can be held responsible for their actions, still means anything in American democracy. The families of Renee and Alex Pretti deserve answers. They deserve to know why their loved ones are dead. They deserve to see body camera footage. They deserve full investigations. They deserve truth. And they deserve accountability. Minneapolis residents who watched federal forces occupy their city for weeks deserve accountability. Protesters who were pepper sprayed, tackled, and intimidated for exercising First Amendment rights deserve accountability. Americans watching federal agents kill citizens on video deserve accountability. This is the test. This is the moment we find out whether Congress can still check executive power. Whether evidence still matters more than partisan loyalty. Whether American democracy retains any capacity to hold government officials responsible when they abuse their power and American citizens die. The impeachment resolution has been filed. The evidence is documented. The coalition has been assembled. And the nation is watching. Keep watching Warfield Chronicles, because we're going to follow every development in this constitutional crisis until there's resolution. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts on whether Trump will fire Noem or try to ride this out. This is the biggest test of accountability in modern American governance, and how it resolves will define the limits of federal power for generations to come.